Hi guys, I'm Jeremy, and today I'll talk about my experience commercial fishing in Alaska. I did purse seining and gill netting my first season up there. I just made a video you can check up here on how I got the job. So I had got to town and I went up to a burger place and I asked them if anyone was looking for a worker. And the people mentioned that the Tammy Eileen needed a worker and the guy Pete was the skipper. So I went down there and I eventually met him. So anyway, I'll continue with this story. I hope you enjoy. Cheers. So, the first thing I noticed is that the boat wasn't in amazing condition. It was a little bit messy inside. It didn't look like it was super well kept. The skipper, Pete, was only like 25. I think it's a huge responsibility for anyone at a young age to run a boat because there's just so much involved. So it took a while for us to get everything ready for the season. And we actually missed the first trip for the first few days because of some mechanical problems and needing parts and this and that. Our second trip, we headed out a few hours away to a place in this harbor, and we actually had a pretty good catch out there for that trip, which was great. Good way to start off the season with, raise our morale. And so for June, it was not amazing, but it wasn't too bad. So in general, young guys at that age, they come into town, it's easy to party a bit and not leave always on time and stuff and whatnot, and some mechanical problems. I got along with the crew members okay. They were pretty cool. The one guy, Clint, was kind of the thorn in everyone's side. He's kind of the funny guy, but he's kind of obnoxious. And I think Pete knew that me and that guy would probably get in a fight. So the skipper, Pete, his family has a couple boats. So they had the Tammy Eileen and then the Marie H, which was an old school boat, I think from like the 1930s or something. And they had a guy, Tommy, running it, who's like 82 years old. And he came into the harbor and mentioned, he's like, "Hey, Pete, I need a crew member." Pete's like, "Do you want to change stuff up?" And I was like, "I don't know, should I?" And he's like, "Yeah, why don't you go with the old man and it'll be more chill and you could experience gill netting. It shouldn't be too bad for you." And I was like, "All right, I'll give it a shot." And he also said, he wouldn't penalize me or anything. If you do quit or you don't make it through the season, as I mentioned, you get about 10% usually. I think you just get about a half share. Or they might even, you might not get almost anything. So you really got to try to make it through the season. And that's also very stressful too because not just if you don't make it, but if the skipper finds a reason to fire you, you could lose all of that money you would have earned. So that's another kind of stressful thing I think about commercial fishing is that I know the first guy I met, I think his name was Mitch. He, worked for, a couple weeks or something, 2 or 3 weeks with us, and he was cooking and doing different things. And my boss let him go. I don't know exactly the reason why, but so he was just, he didn't make any money and he was back looking for jobs again. And he wasn't a young guy either. He must have been in his early 50s. So it could be a really tough deal for a lot of people. So working for the old man Tommy was a really funny experience. The guy's 82. I can't imagine how long he's been telling people the same thing over and over, like to greenhorns, guys like me. And the other guy had just come up to Alaska that season too from Washington State. And so, he's like, "I don't know what I'm going to do with you guys. Jesus Christ, you don't know how to do anything. You just know how to go to McDonald's. You don't know shit about boats. Jesus Christ." He's just going on and on, screaming, having all these meltdowns all the time. It's kind of funny. But overall, he was a really cool dude. And I actually even ended up going to his house, hanging out, and I stayed there, I think, quite a bit of the summer. It was cool to hear his stories. He had just, 70 years of stories in Alaska, and I actually regret not writing them down or recording stuff because you could have written a book about all the stories this guy had. So working with Tommy was really funny. He was a local native guy, and it was amazing because Tommy's vision was awesome. The guy could see perfectly, super far away and notice little tiny details. So some natural ability he had in a way, but the only problem is that he couldn't read the radar and know how to use the modern equipment. So we're going back to town a lot of the time at night, and I just hear him screaming, "I can't see! I can't see!" And we're going at night, and he's kind of running around, and he can't see at nighttime, and he can't read the radar. But luckily, he's been doing it for so many years that he always got us back and stuff. And of course, there's lights on the boat, so there's some safety. But generally, it's not super safe if you can't read the radar. Yeah, and it was kind of funny, too, because he used to drink up until a few years before that. And obviously, drinking and fishing don't mix. There couldn't be anything more dangerous, right? And I think he's had about 3 people over the years die on trips out there. Mostly drinking related. I think one guy was drinking related. Another guy was actually mayor of the town. He went on a trip with Tommy, and I'm not sure if that was drinking related, but like he washed up on the shore on the because we're on the island on the main part of Alaska, and there's tons of bears there, and I think a bear ate the guy. And I think there was some other guy had passed away, probably drinking or something. But of course, he'd been fishing for almost 70 years, so it's not unusual that you'd lose 2 or 3 crew members, to be honest. Especially back in the day, I think, even like when you drop your fish off at a tender, like the guys would give you cases of beer and stuff. So there was a lot more drinking and stuff like that back in the day. Of course, there's still a lot of drinking when you're in town, but not much when you're actually working on the job. But it was funny because all the people would like to come up to his place and drink or ask him for money and stuff like that. So he even had a sign on the door with leave me alone, no money, no jobs, no, something like this. So as far as the fishing schedule, it's a little different for purse seining than set netting. For purse seining and Sandpoint at least, June was generally like 4 days on, 1 day off. And then there was like 2 days on, 1 day off. And then in August, you get the pink run, and it depends how many fish are coming in. So the government will monitor and regulate that. So you might not fish if there's not a lot of fish coming in. So you're actually not on the boat, like at sea, for like weeks at a time in general. You go out for a day or two, and then you're back in. But now, even when you're going out for 4 days and you come back for a day, like you're doing maintenance on the boat or this or that. So it's not really like you have a lot of time off, especially in June. The first week of July, no one fishes. It's just, I think it's closed to everyone. Maybe some set netters can go out some of the time. And then, you do that 2 days on, 1 day off. And then the set netters, they had a different schedule. Like, for instance, they might have, like, the mainland of Alaska might be open, but the Shumagan Islands might be closed. So the schedule's different all the time. And you might stay out there longer. I think in general on set netting, like we went out maybe for like a week at a time or a few days at a time. Where the purse seining, we were moving back and forth a little bit more. So, when you're back in town, when you do have time off, there's definitely a lot of drinking going on. You could go up to the Sandpoint Tavern and, spend plenty of time there, which of course that could add up. It's not cheap, to drink. It's costs more than the lower 48. So you don't want to waste your whole paycheck drinking, or some of the guys like to play cards and lost a lot of money doing that. So try to keep that regulated if you can, or you're going to end up blowing all your money the whole season. Other guys definitely had drug habits, and they're paying a lot of money for pills. I think one OxyContin was like $150. So those guys were just burning through that, or sending money back home. And they just were really not making much money over the season. A lot of those guys were just getting advance payments throughout the season, and they didn't end up with anything at the end pretty much. So you gotta make sure you don't get involved with any of this riffraff and drug use and heavy drinking. So we also hung out a lot at people's houses. The last season I hung out quite a bit at my boss's house, which is kind of good and bad. Like, it's nice to be in a house and not at the boat, but then you're like around your boss all the time, and they could be drunk and make a mess, and you gotta clean up after it all the time. And it's kind of like whatever they want to do, you have to do, right? So if they want to play guitar all day or watch a million videos of Elvis playing, you have to do that, which, the first 20 or 30 times is cool. Maybe after 100 times gets a little old. Yeah, so of course, being around people in close quarters, there's some stress there. I think it was great that we were able to get back in the town, and people were able to go back to either their family or get a little bit of space that way. So in general, I didn't feel too much tension, except for like that first boat with a few of those guys. There was tension, like I said, that guy Clint. There's quite a lot of issues. And I know when I left that boat, a few of those guys got in a fight, like on the next trip or something like that, and they had to like tie a guy down, and he had a knife out and was drunk. So there could be definitely issues where crew members could get in fights or someone could get killed. So you got to try to keep a decent relationship with everyone, and realize everyone needs a little bit of space or whatever. I was at least lucky the last season. I worked with those guys at Sea King. Everything was great. I didn't have any animosity or any issues, except for my boss a bit. But I guess that's always expected a little bit. But the other crew members, we got along well. But that's important. You want to make sure you're on a boat where, you can hopefully get along well. If you're really having issues with the people, it's really going to make your life hell. I also went out and I did one halibut job for a few days on Pete's boat. I think it was during the week in July when we had off. So long lining is like, obviously with fishing you've got one line. So this is one super long line with an anchor on each end, and it's at the bottom of the ocean. And there's a bunch of hooks along the way, and each hook has a piece of fish or bait. and the fish will come and will bite that and get, hooked on that. And then you reel that in. So you set it out for like a day or two, and then you bring that in, and hopefully there's a bunch of fish that come over. And of course that's a little more dangerous because you're dealing with all of these hooks. And with halibut fishing, you have to bleed the fish. So you have to cut open every individual fish that you get. So like when you're salmon fishing, in general, you're not bleeding each of the salmon fish. You just deliver that to the factory and they do that. Although you do bleed some of the fish, like the king salmon, I know we bled before we brought to the factory. I don't remember exactly why, but that's just the way that those were delivered. Halibut fishing could be a great way to make money, but yeah, you're dealing with knives all day. You have to kill the fish, so you have to hit them in the head 1 or 2 times or whatever to make sure they stop moving, and then you have to cut them, and then you throw that into the fish hold. So the second guy I worked with was okay, but he had just quit heroin, and I think he was jonesing for it, so he was kind of, after a few days working, we're picking out the fish individually, and he's like, oh, man, hurry up, man, and he's kind of losing it a little bit. Maybe he's just frustrated in general, because it is frustrating as hell. And I was new too, in all fairness, so I probably was taking some time. But he was all right. He ended up working on another boat anyway, so I think I did quite a bit with just me and the old man. But overall, we had a decent season and made some money. We got to explore some pretty cool areas. We went out to around the mainland quite a bit, and there was some nice scenery there. We even got on land and checked out some things there. He was a little bit of an adventurer spirit for sure. We went off and he had a gun and we're shooting and doing different stuff on the mainland. So of course it's super dangerous, right? Especially when we don't know very much of what's going on. And for instance, when you're set netting, you usually put everything into the skiff, and then you'll bring that out to where you're gonna set up, and you'll drop the anchors and the net and stuff like that from the skiff. The other way to do it is everything goes off the stern in the back. And so we had thrown in the anchor and the net was coming off, and it's in 2 different boxes. Like, we're not really paying attention or know exactly what's going on. It's just the old man's like, do this, put this, and we're just doing it. And I remember too, my buddy was there at the back of the boat, kind of sitting there. I kind of moved to the front of the boat a little bit because I was like, I don't know if it's safe to be off there. And the anchor, we didn't put the second anchor in at the end, and so when the other anchor eventually pulled off the net, and when it gets to the other side, it's taut. So eventually the anchor, had so much tension on the back of the boat that it just flipped up and flew into the water at about 100 miles an hour. And, not really super far from his face, and he would have definitely gotten killed if that had hit him. So, there's a lot of dangerous things that could happen. I know I did another trip with a guy set netting, and he had super heavy anchors and stuff. And not the season I was out there, but later on, I know he had another young guy, and they were doing some dungeness crab fishing. And the kid got, wrapped around a rope, and, he got thrown into the water and died. So it's definitely dangerous out there. And there's a lot of heavy equipment moving around. And you've got the deck winch is a powerful machine that you use to bring in the ropes and bring in equipment and stuff like that. If your rain jacket or arm or something gets caught in there and someone doesn't turn it off, that would definitely kill you, or maim you or something like that. Also the deck, you've got to clean it off and wash it off because there's kelp and different things. They'll be super slippery, so you could fall down. You're carrying heavy things and the boat's rocking back and forth. Even inside the boat, things are moving around. You wouldn't necessarily get hurt, but you have to make sure everything's tied down. You've got the refrigerator there, and the thing will just pop open if it's not latched, right? So everything in the refrigerator can come out, the garbage, anything. You gotta tie everything down. Same thing with everything on the back deck. You gotta make sure everything back there is tied down when you're going on a long trip back to town, for instance, because everything will just bang back and forth. So my first day going out, I was a little nervous, of course, because I know it's going to be super hard work. And for purse seining, you generally have 3 guys in the back. You've got one guy with the lead line. That's the part of the net that will be at the bottom of the ocean. The guy in the middle is the web, or the net in general. And then you have another guy who's on the corks, and the corks are what's floating at the top. And so the machine is bringing it in, and then we're putting it down so that it can easily go out next time, and it doesn't get all tangled up, basically. And so, if you watch people do it, it doesn't seem like it would be that hard, to be honest. But it definitely is not easy, especially if you're not used to it. And what happens is with new guys like me, we're kind of trying to do too much. So they say we're fighting the web. We're fighting the net. And I'm kind of doing this, trying to grab everything. And so it's like you're doing, 10 rounds of boxing in like 2 minutes. It's just like you're completely exhausted, totally out of air, and you're super tired. You're sore, of course. And also at the beginning of season, you don't have your sea legs. And that's because the muscles in your legs aren't really that strong yet. So the first few days are always going to be really hard. And then once you get in a little better shape, it's not quite as bad on your legs. But at the beginning, it's super tough. So you kind of learn to like just take the net in. Like don't fight it, just kind of guide it a bit. And it's not too bad, except for when it's windy. And when it's windy, the net just blows almost halfway off the boat, right? And so you've got to try to like get that in. And generally the skippers don't care if there's like some little fish occasionally, because your big load comes at the end when all the fish you unload basically. But I had one boss who wanted us to pick those out, so I'm kind of stressed out because I'm like picking each individual fish out too as it's coming in. So yeah, and of course the boat's rocking back and forth as you're doing all these things, so whether you're doing the corks or the lead line or web, it's pretty tough. I don't know which one's the hardest. I think web actually could be the easiest if it's not windy. The lead line doesn't seem too bad. It's heavier, but at least you could throw it anywhere. The corks usually have to go kind of in a circle or like a figure eight or something. Like there's got to be some kind of pattern for that to go out the best way. I know the skipper, Pete, even mentioned to me later in the season that he thought I was going to quit that first day because I was having such a hard time. Which is reasonable. I mean, it is quite hard work, but I was definitely not going to quit at any point. So, of course, you have to do a ton of maintenance. Like, when you're in town, you have to fix the net. Because, of course, the net goes out, and you could have anything happen to the net, right? Like, I mean, you could have a whale come through and destroy the net, technically. So you'll have to, like, patch the net from, any wear and tear that it gets. It could be, stuck on rocks in the bottom of the ocean and get ripped. So there's a lot of maintenance that you're going to need to do with the net and other equipment. So, of course, at the beginning of the season, you're going to need to do a lot of prep work. Of course, in my situation, I kind of came a little bit late, so I was only there maybe a week before. But some guys will have you come up there several weeks before. I know my second season up there, I was there, I think, 5 weeks before the season started. We painted and put in the reduction gear and did tons of work. So you're going to have to do tons of prep work, like painting the boat, getting the net on, getting the food, all kinds of extra stuff that you're going to have to do for like 2 or 3 weeks before you even fish. And you also might have a long journey, like those guys came up from Homer, Alaska, because the work he needed done on his boat, they only could do in Homer. So then you might have a 2-day voyage and then have to do, 2 or 3 weeks of work or something like that. So you'll certainly meet a lot of interesting characters up there. I'd hiked the Appalachian Trail before, and I'd been in the military and stuff. So I've met some interesting people over the years, and commercial fishing is, really similar kinds of people of all walks of life. And even the locals in Sandpoint were pretty funny. Yeah, they all had these funny nicknames like Jake the Snake or whatever. It was all kinds of things. So I spent a lot of time up at Tommy's place, and so all these people were over and drinking a lot. Like a lot of funny times for sure. So for gill netting, we're doing set netting with 2 anchors on each end. So you basically take the skiff along the net, and you'd look down and you could see in the water for the most part. You could see where there would be fish, and then if you could see the fish, you would pull up the net and then take that off, flick that off into the boat, into the bags, and then later you would send those bags over to the tender and you would deliver the fish that way. So picking out the fish, especially at the beginning, it's really hard because it's like kind of stuck in the gill, and it's not always easy to get them out. A lot of the time the fish is like really wrapped up in there. Other times you're catching a lot of other fish, like there's this I think rockfish or something like that that's black, and occasionally you get those are super they have a lot of these little spikes on there. So if you work with those, they're going to cut through your gloves a lot of the times, and you can cut your fingers. So you got to be really careful with some of the fish because they're pretty sharp. But once you get used to gill netting, once you get used to picking the fish, it's not too bad. Like you kind of get in a rhythm and you can flick them out pretty fast. You'll still have the same kind of maintenance you would have with purse seining. A lot of that net gets destroyed. So learning how to sew could be something you could learn on your own, technically. You could look at some videos online and learn how to sew and fix a net. There's kind of an art to it. And if you're a greenhorn and you don't have experience, but you go up to a boat and you're like, hey, I don't have experience, but I know how to sew, that could help you probably get a job. So that's something to consider. And also the guys who could like stitch 2 lines together, and do different things with the rope, those guys were also very valuable. So if you learn some of those skills in your free time, that could also help you in the long run. So another thing that could help you get jobs is if you can cook. When I was on the first boat, Pete asked me if I could do it. There was that one guy, Mitch, who was cooking, but he got rid of him for some reason. So I started cooking, and it's an extra task because you got to get up before everyone, and you have to have all the bacon and eggs and all this stuff ready before everyone else. So it's kind of a way to help you get a job, but it's also an extra job you have to do. At least you don't have to do some other side jobs, like maybe when the guys are delivering the fish or doing other things, the cook is obviously busy. So it relieves you of some duties, but overall, I think it's a lot more work. As far as hygiene issues, like you could usually shower on most of those boats, or you can go to the harbor master and they usually have showers and stuff, because sometimes like your boat's in the dry dock and you can't shower on the boat, so you usually go to like the harbor master around that area would have some showers. I think generally they're free. Maybe some harbors you might have to pay. So, you know, we ate really well on the boat. We got all our food up from Seattle, and we, you know, it's not like we're just eating fish all the season. I think a lot of people are just like, oh, you eat salmon every day, which don't get me wrong, salmon is amazing. We do eat salmon some of the time, but a lot of the season, you know, we're just eating like burgers, steak, chicken, mashed potatoes, veggies, salads, all kinds of stuff. So you're definitely eating good all season. So I did the first month purse seining, a little bit of halibut, and then I did gill netting the rest of the season more or less. And then I figured I'd try to get one more job. So I was looking around for some dungeness crab fishing. And I found one guy on the boat, the Robin, who needed someone. And he was an interesting character. So I'll save that one for next time, because that's kind of a longer story. Yeah, so at the end of the season, you go down to the cannery and they make a check for you after they deduct all the fuel and food. And I made a few $1,000s. Of course, it costs a couple $1,000s for the plane tickets and other things too. So not a ton of money, but at least it gave me experience for the other seasons in the future. Because like I said, you know, you're not going to go up there easily and get on a great boat and make a ton of money, unless you're really lucky or know someone, to be honest. So yeah, after the season, then I actually went back and continued on a cycling trip in the Middle East and Africa and South America, and then I would come back the next year. So I'll have more on that with my dungeness crab fishing in the next few days. So I hope this video was informative for you and gave you some good insight to some of the basic aspects of fishing in Alaska. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.